founding of Cedar Falls is almost always attributed to one man, William Sturgis, who arrived here in 1845 and named the settlement Sturgis Falls. However, Sturgis was accompanied by his brother-in-law, Erasmus Adams, a cabinet maker and schoolteacher from Maine, who came to Iowa by way of Ohio. Erasmus Adams, the co-founder of Cedar Falls, remained in the community for 25 years, providing both business and civic leadership, while his brother-in-law moved on within 2 years. Yet the contributions of Erasmus Adams and his role as co-founder of Cedar Falls have been largely forgotten.
Erasmus Darwin Adams was born on Saturday, December 31st, 1814, in Sumner, Maine. He was the second child of Dr. Joseph Adams and Betsy Farnham Adams. His namesake, Erasmus Darwin, the illustrious British Enlightenment thinker, physician, and grandfather of Charles Darwin, had died about a decade before Erasmus Darwin Adams was born. Before he was 1 year old, Erasmus moved with his parents and his 2-year-old brother David to Rumford, Maine. By the time he was 10 years old, Erasmus had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. His boyhood must have been stimulating. Rumford was recently settled, and the area was still wild. His father, who worked as both a physician and a farmer, likely made a comfortable living. Several families lived in their neighborhood, and the large Androscoggin River was within easy walking distance. When he was 18, Erasmus was sent to the Wesleyan Seminary at Kents Hill, Maine, where he spent 2 years studying liberal arts and vocational skills, such as woodworking and agriculture. His concentration was English. After Erasmus left Kents Hill Seminary in 1835, he is believed to have taught school in Maine briefly. In 1836, at age 21, he joined his father Joseph in moving to Warrensville, Ohio, near the residence of Erasmus's uncle, John Emery Adams. Here he put his woodworking skills to use, making chairs. In 1839, the family was on the move again. Erasmus, his father, and several from John Emery Adams' family moved to the region soon to be designated Johnson County, Iowa. Most of the family settled in Solon, but Erasmus and his father chose Iowa City, about 12 miles north. In the following year, Erasmus's father died of typhoid fever. In Iowa City, Erasmus became acquainted with William Sturgis, both of them being in their early 20s. William was a son of Judge John Sturgis, the founder of Sturgis, Michigan. In November 1840, William Sturgis married Dorothy Kidder in Iowa City. After becoming friends with William Sturgis, Erasmus learned about William's younger sister, Catherine, who lived with her parents in Sturgis, Michigan, and they likely began corresponding. At William's home on August 5, 1841, Erasmus and Catherine were married 1 year to the day after his father's passing. During some period before and after their marriage, Erasmus taught school in Monmouth, Illinois, about 100 miles east of Solon. In April 1843, Catherine traveled back to Sturgis, Michigan, for the birth of her first child, Martha Jane. Sadly, in August of the same year, the baby died. After losing both his father and child, Erasmus decided to move the family to the Solon area, where several of his cousins lived. In June 1844, their second child, John Sturgis Adams, was born. 5 months later, a daughter was born to brother-in-law William and Dorothy Sturgis. In the summer of 1844, William, aged 27, and Erasmus, aged 29, should have been ready to settle down with their growing families, but they both were still restless. A newspaper article reported, quote, "It is said Adams learned something of the wilderness territory while in Johnson County. After visiting Cedar Rapids, he envisioned similar places farther up the Cedar River where settlements might be made," end quote. Then one day, William heard the reports of trappers and surveyors of a particular place on the Cedar River, about 80 miles northwest, where there was a region with good mix of prairie and woodland, as well as a 6-foot waterfall that could potentially serve as a mill site. The next March, with wagons packed, William and Erasmus were on their way, following the Red Cedar River upstream until they reached the falls.
The Red Cedar River, the main stream of Iowa, runs diagonally through the center of the county from northwest to southeast. It is a beautiful stream running over a rocky, gravelly bed. Its waters are clear, and it is fed by living springs in Iowa and Minnesota. Its banks were formerly covered with groves of red cedar trees, from which fact it took its name. Cedar Falls, the garden city of the Cedar Valley, is situated on the west bank of the Cedar River. No more beautiful site for a city can be found in the West than that which Cedar Falls occupies.
Sturgis and Adams were thrilled at what they found and could easily imagine a new settlement being established there. William Sturgis chose land on both sides of the river, including the falls, and Erasmus Adams chose land about 1.5 miles farther south.
After a careful survey of the country, my father chose land for his claim that suited him better than any place he had ever seen. It was 1 mile or more southeast of the falls, commencing near the spring, in Dry Run, now on the Waterloo Road. The line running east took in part of the mouth of the Dry Run and a little of the Cedar River. There, among the many little springs, he saw good building stone. The timber was good, with many sugar maple trees, and the prairie land south of the timber was rich and of good depth. He built his cabin in the edge of the timber on the south, and later had breaking done and hay put up.
William Sturgis built a cabin near where present-day Washington Street ends at the river, and Erasmus built his near the present-day intersection of Waterloo Road and Rainbow Drive. They each began the strenuous work of turning the 5 acres of prairie sod that was required to validate their claims. In September of 1845, William and Erasmus returned to Johnson County to bring their wives and children to the wilderness by the Cedar River. Henry Farnham Adams, who was born in the fall of the following year, wrote many years later of his parents' experiences in those first years.
I remember hearing Mother tell of their arrival at the new home, how delighted they were, how Father went to the spring for water and brought back a nice fish, how they found in the thickets and woods the different wild fruits and nuts in abundance, also wild honey. The river was alive with fish and easily caught. It was indeed another land of promise. Then their first winter was mild. The oxen were turned out and lived in the bottoms. Most of the hay was left over, but there were drawbacks and hardships to be endured in the years ahead. The nearest grits mill, doctor, and post office were at Cedar Rapids, 60 miles away. There were Indians and large timber wolves prowling around. They had chills and fever and lots of mosquitoes.
Erasmus and Catherine faced daunting challenges in making their move to the wilderness successful. Their success got a head start from the supplies and livestock they brought from Solon, which was supplemented by the natural abundance of the land. In spring, they tapped hundreds of trees and boiled the sap down to make maple sugar.
They made maple sugar every spring, and one year Father said they tapped 900 trees with the help of one William Garrison, an ex-soldier just returned from the war with Mexico. Most of the sugar was taken to Dubuque, along with tubs of butter Mother had made, the sale of which bought a cook stove with a real oven and doing away with the old bake kettles.
Within about 2 years of the Sturgis-Adams settlement, brothers John and Dempsey Overman and John Barrick purchased William Sturgis's claim, and William Sturgis moved to Minnesota. The John Overman and John Barrick families moved into William Sturgis's double log cabin near the river.
Leonard Eck says that the first water wheel made in the Cedar Valley was made for William Sturgis for the sawmill put in by the Overmans, and that he helped to make it. It was called the Prosperous Smith Wheel.
The Overmans wasted no time in transforming the falls. With the employment of a number of settlers, they constructed a substantial brush and log dam and a 70-foot wide and 6-foot deep mill race. A new sawmill was operational by 1848 and a grist mill by 1850. The mills acted like a magnet, drawing people from miles around, some coming to deliver or pick up loads, and others to make Cedar Falls their home. By the end of 1854, there were 450 residents in the town, along with a couple of stores, a hotel, and a newspaper. By 1855, 9 water wheels powered 3 additional sawmills and a furniture factory. In the same year, a brick factory produced 75,000 fired bricks. By 1860, the population was 1,500, not counting the hundreds living on the surrounding farms. Stagecoaches traveled regularly between Cedar Falls and Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Dubuque, and in 1861, the railroad arrived.
Cedar Falls was originally settled on account of its magnificent water power that in early days made manufacturing possible. That power has been improved from time to time until it now turns the wheels of a number of large manufacturing plants.
During these first few years in the Sturgis Falls settlement, the Adams family was also busy and growing. By 1850, sons Henry and Amos had been born, joining older brother John Adams on the homestead near Dry Run. In addition to farming, Erasmus supplemented his income with woodworking. About 1850, Erasmus built an addition to his cabin for use as a woodworking shop with a pedal-driven lathe. He specialized in making 3-legged stools which did not wobble on uneven floors.
In the early 1850s, Father built an addition to the cabin for a chair shop. I remember well seeing him running the lathe by foot power.
In 1851, the town of Cedar Falls was platted, and the next year Erasmus was given a lot where he built a frame house into which the family moved that fall. This would have been located at about 221 Main Street.
The front room was given up, and Father put in some slab benches he made, and Dr. Keeler taught the first school, at least the first I remember of. We were taught to sing the spelling lessons. It was B-A, ba, B-E-B, etc. We thought it was great fun, and we'll never forget the tune we spelled it by.
B-A-Bay, B-A-B, B-I, Bicky Bye, B-O, Bo, Bicky Bye, Bo, B-U, Boo, Bicky Bye, Bo, Boo. C-A, say, C-E-C, C-I, Sicky Sai, C-O, so, Sicky Sai, so, C-U, Sue, Sicky Sai, so, Sue.
The Adams Main Street home was known to be standing in 1864 and is likely one of the buildings pictured in the 200 block of Main Street on the 1868 bird's eye map of Cedar Falls. The building later served as a stagecoach stop and an inn for a few years. In January 1853, the General Assembly appointed commissioners to locate and establish the county seat of Black Hawk County. On June 9, 1853, the commissioners met at the house of Erasmus D. Adams in the village of Cedar Falls and chose Cedar Falls as the county seat, the proprietors of the village donating 56 lots for the purpose of raising funds to erect county buildings. The lots were ordered to be sold at auction, and on December 24, 1853, 17 were sold, raising $243.25. One lot, now known as Overman Park, was given as Courthouse Square, although no courthouse would ever be erected because, in January 1855, the General Assembly, by special act, ordered that a vote be taken on the question of removing the county seat to Waterloo, which was ultimately successful. Also in 1853, the Cedar Falls School District was formed. Erasmus Adams was elected secretary, with Stephen A. Bishop serving as president and John Milton Overman as treasurer. The district until that time had relied first on Roxy L. Hart Taylor, Mrs. Jackson Taylor, who taught school in her home, along with Dr. Keeler and other community members. In 1853, the district voted to raise, quote, all the funds by tax that the law would allow, end quote, but found this to be insufficient so a subscription was circulated which raised the money for the first schoolhouse to be built.
Pay your school tax without grumbling. It is the cheapest premium of insurance on your property. You are educating those who make laws for yourself and your children, those who are to elect your county, state, and national officers, and your judges and juries. Build more schoolhouses. They will spare you the building of more prisons and jails.
The school was 24 by 30 feet with a belfry and served 41 students between the ages of 5 and 21. In the 1856 Iowa census, Erasmus gave his occupation as carpentry, probably because he was focused on making chairs at this time.
Father rented space in the mill for his chair shop and did a good business for several years, making enough pay for his land.
The 1856 Iowa census also revealed that Erasmus's brother, Dr. Henry M. Adams, his wife Cordelia, and children Frank and Delia had come the previous year to Cedar Falls. Henry M. Adams listed his profession variously as physician, surgeon, and dentist. Based on his many advertisements in the Cedar Falls Gazette, his practice appeared to focus on dentistry. Henry and Cordelia Adams had 2 more children by 1860, and then in April 1866, Cordelia died. Later that year, Henry traveled back east to marry Cordelia's sister Charlotte, where his photo was taken. The family remained in Cedar Falls until 1880, at which time they moved to South Dakota. Overall, Erasmus and Catherine Adams owned 683 acres of land. His main property, however, was around his original purchase in Section 18. In 1860, Erasmus gave his occupation as farming and indicated that he owned 110 improved acres valued at $5,000, 3 horses, 2 milk cows, 3 other cattle, and 3 pigs. He had produced the previous year 100 bushels of wheat, 600 bushels of Indian corn, and 750 bushels of oats. As early as April 1846, Erasmus became one of 3 elected judges of the peace, which was the only legal authority established in the region, a position that resulted in his being called Squire Adams. This designation was so well known in Cedar Falls that articles referred to him in this way without further identification. In 1854, Erasmus Adams was the notary public, who notarized the papers filing the new plat for the village of Cedar Falls. In the early 1860s, Adams was an active participant in the Lincoln and Hamlin Club, the fledgling Republican Party supporting Abraham Lincoln for president, and the Horticulture and Literary Society Club. In June 1860, he was part of the committee with Peter Melendy, Dempsey Overman, Moses Chapman, and Zimri Streeter, charged with planning a Republican meeting for the Lincoln and Hamlin Club. He also was, quote, an early friend of temperance and the anti-slavery cause, end quote, and he was active in the Episcopal Church. An Episcopal congregation began meeting in Cedar Falls in 1853, and the church was established in Cedar Falls in 1855. The congregation met in private homes and rented halls until 1867, when they built a building at 8th and Main Streets. In 1862, the family, Erasmus and Catherine, with their 4 children, John, Henry, Amos, and Ardelacy, Dilla, moved to a 2-story house on their original farmland. This home, still standing at 1930 Waterloo Road, has been known as the Miller Home due to the long residency there of Erasmus's brother-in-law, Henry Miller, who in April 1870 purchased a portion of Erasmus's farm on Waterloo Road for $65 an acre. Henry Miller married Hannah Sturgis, who was living with her sister Catherine and brother-in-law Erasmus Adams in Cedar Falls in 1856. Their sons, Frank and James Miller, were born in Cedar Falls. The Adams-Miller home became a well-known fixture in Cedar Falls. In the 1930s, the home became the Tally Ho Tea Room, and still later the location of a salad dressing business. It is now once again a private residence. The original Adams log cabin was located near this home. It was likely on the west side of present-day Waterloo Road, where the foundation of a much older home was discovered during a 1970s construction. At this peak time of his family's farming productivity, Erasmus decided to sell his property because of his declining health and probably also because he knew that his family workforce would not be staying there for long. In August 1870, Erasmus advertised for sale 80 acres of his old homestead property, 15 half-acre lots, and his household goods. Soon after, Erasmus decided to leave his home, thus ending 25 years in Cedar Falls. During those 25 years, Erasmus served the community in a variety of roles and had seen the population grow to more than 3,000. Early in 1870, Erasmus left on a trip of a few months to Colorado and, quote, a large breadth of country in states and territories, end quote. His next choice of a home site was influenced by Timothy Clark, an old friend from his Johnson County days. In the early 1840s, Erasmus and Timothy farmed near Solon. They were less than a year apart in age and had gotten married in Iowa City within 6 months of each other. Their paths separated after Erasmus and Catherine left Solon, but they apparently stayed in contact. By 1870, Timothy, his wife Elvira, and his 6 children had moved from Solon to Granby in southwest Missouri. In 1871, the whole Adams family, with the exception of John Sturgis Adams, moved near Newtonia in far southwest Missouri, a town of about 500 residents and 7 miles from Granby, where the Clarks were living. In the early 1880s, Erasmus and Catherine Adams, with their youngest daughter Dilla, moved from Newtonia, Missouri, to Clearwater, Kansas, 20 miles southwest of Wichita, with a population of 400. In March 1890, Dilla moved to McAllister, a town of 3,000 in Indian Territory, Oklahoma. About 1891, Erasmus and Catherine decided to move to McAllister to be near their daughter Dilla. On January 24, 1899, Catherine died at age 77, and on January 30, 1901, Erasmus died at age 86. Both were buried in Oak Hill Memorial Park in McAllister.
Erasmus and Catherine Adams were the parents of 4 children who grew up in Cedar Falls. Their first child, John Sturgis Adams, was born in June 1844 in Johnson County, Iowa, and died December 3, 1938, at age 94 in Los Angeles County, California. John started life as a farmer. In 1870, he owned 20 improved acres worth $1,200 in Waterloo Township, which were most likely obtained from his father before the family moved to Missouri. John also had 4 horses worth $500 and implements worth $125. On April 7, 1872, John married Phoebe Bickley, daughter of Dr. John Abraham Bickley and Anna Good of Waterloo, Iowa. His brother Amos reflected on John's possible move to a farm in 1878.
Yes, I think John could do well on a farm with Phoebe for a wife. But if he can do tolerably well where he is, he had better stay a while yet.
John later sold his farm and became a sales representative in Iowa for the St. Paul Harvester Company, and then a partner in a carriage manufacturing firm. In 1887, the family moved to California, settling on a ranch in the Marina Valley, 10 miles north of Campo, a village 65 miles west of downtown San Diego. Reached over a narrow, winding road, it was very near the Mexican border. It was a sparsely populated, wild, semi-arid region at more than 3,000 feet elevation. John later acquired another ranch about 25 miles northwest of Campo. Soon after, however, he left the ranch and began working on the construction of the Hotel del Coronado, known as the Del, on Coronado Island, San Diego. In 1889, his daughter Katie died of pneumonia, and his wife Phoebe moved back to Waterloo, Iowa with their children. John also returned to Waterloo briefly, but ultimately returned to California, where he established a fruit farm. Following Phoebe's death, he remarried and died in California in 1938. Erasmus's second child, Henry Farnham Adams, was the first white male child born in Black Hawk County. Henry purchased a farm and married Hattie Clark in March 1872. Over the next 10 years, Henry and Hattie had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Besides being a farmer, Henry was a bookkeeper, a shorthand reporter, and a musician. In 1868, he had helped to form the Cedar Falls Musical Society, and in 1870, he purchased an SD organ for the considerable cost of $340 and had it shipped from Vermont. He must have enjoyed filling his home with music. In 1938, Henry and Hattie celebrated their 66th wedding anniversary. Although residents of Pomona, California for many years, the milestone was recognized in Black Hawk County's Courier.
Henry F. Adams, 91, first male white child born in Black Hawk County, and his wife, 85, celebrated their 66th wedding anniversary at their home in Pomona, California, last Sunday. A letter from Reverend F. P. Fisher of Waterloo, who is in California with his wife for the winter, states, "Both Mr. and Mrs. Henry F. Adams, despite their advanced age, are in good health. They have lived in Pomona for 15 years. They were married March 20th, 1872, in Neosho, Missouri, and after 2 years on a farm there, moved to Kansas and then to Arizona." The Adams and Sturgis families settled in Johnson County, Iowa, in 1843, coming there from Michigan. Sturgis and Adams had heard trappers say there was an excellent dam site at the falls of the Cedar, present site of Cedar Falls. Early in the spring of 1845, the 2 men set out for this heralded dam site. They moved their families there in the fall of the same year. The land selected for the Adams cabin was about a mile southeast of the falls of the Cedar. It embraced the icy cold springs near the mouth of Dry Run and extended along Waterloo Road and Rainbow Drive. This afterwards was a part of the Pfeiffer Farm.
Erasmus's third son, Amos Darwin Adams, was born September 9, 1848 in Black Hawk County, Iowa, and died April 12, 1916, at age 67 in Prescott, Arizona. Amos Adams became a good friend of Eli P. Clark, the oldest son of Timothy and Elvira Clark. In 1875, the 2 decided to join a wagon train, traveling 1,200 miles over the Santa Fe Trail through hostile country to Arizona, a trip that took 3 months, arriving in Prescott on August 11th. The town had about 750 residents, not counting the military or Native Americans. Amos got a job as the chief clerk of C.T. Hayden and Company, a general merchandise and mining supplier. 3 of his letters survive from 1876 and 1877. Amos lived in a boarding house with 14 other men and worked by keeping the books and tending the store. Amos wrote to his family about the rampant poverty, apathy of workers, expensive food, lack of rain, bed bugs, and flies.
One thing I ain't troubled with is bed bugs. I don't think there's one in the house, but they don't like me anyway, you know. E.P. was eat up with them last summer. He sleeps in the post office, and it's an old log building, and it's just full of them. He put the legs of his bedstead in cans of water to keep them off, and he said that worked first rate.
In December 1879, Catherine Dunning came by herself from Oswego, New York, to teach school in the Prescott Free Academy. On July 6, 1881, Amos and Kate were married, and they eventually had 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, with one daughter dying at age 1 and a son dying at age 12. In 1878, Amos and his friend E.P. Clark became partners in a new lumber company, Clark and Adams, which included the operation of 3 lumber mills. The management of the prosperous company fell increasingly to Amos as E.P. became the Arizona Territorial Auditor and an effective advocate in building Arizona railroads. In 1891, E.P. was persuaded to move to Los Angeles to become the vice president and manager of the Los Angeles Railway, so the lumber and hardware company became the sole responsibility of Amos. With the departure of E.P., Amos needed help managing the company, so he enlisted his brother, Henry, who was still living in Newtonia, Missouri. Within a couple of years, Henry had moved to Williams, Arizona, which is about 60 miles north of Prescott, to take charge of one of the Clark and Adams sawmills. On April 18, 1916, Amos died from a stroke. The local newspaper described him.
Careful and considerate in all dealings, his business life in this city since 1875 has been as clear as a crystal in his generous deed, his genial nature, and his sincere honesty in all dealings and with everyone alike. Pioneers like Adams are hard for this community and state to lose. He was a useful citizen, a sturdy friend, and a firm builder.
Erasmus Adams' youngest child, daughter Arda Lacey, or Dilla Adams, was born in August 1864 in Black Hawk County, Iowa, and died July 9, 1916, in McAllister, Oklahoma, of tuberculosis. In March 1890, Dilla moved to McAllister, then Indian Territory, Oklahoma, a town of 3,000. She went there to become an instructor of music and drawing in a Presbyterian Indian mission school.
Miss Dilla Adams left Monday for McAllister Indian Territory, where she's accepted a position as instructor of music and drawing in Presbyterian Indian Mission School. Miss Adams is well qualified for the work, being a young lady of many attainments, and her many friends wish her abundant success in her new field of labor. Her departure may cause an aching void in the hearts of some of our young men, but they should remember that duty comes before, and resigned themselves to the parting.
The young man who eventually won her heart was Ernest William Schreiner. He had been living in Parsons, Kansas, 150 miles east of Clearwater, and in 1888 he had moved to McAllister to work on the railroad. On August 6, 1890, 5 months after Dilla had moved there, she and Ernest Schreiner were married in Labette, Kansas, a small town near Parsons. They had 4 children. Dilla died in July 1916 after a long illness. She was remembered as a pioneer who had come from Iowa to teach school. In the 25 years that Erasmus and Catherine Sturgis Adams lived in Cedar Falls, they saw many changes. The community grew from a settlement to a village and then to an established town. The population grew from 13 to over 3,000. The Adams family contributed to the community's growth through hard work and industry, farming, manufacturing, service to travelers, and civic engagement. They contributed through involvement in local organizations and by supporting the development of new community endeavors. But perhaps most important of all, Erasmus Adams contributed to the development of Cedar Falls by co-founding the community with his brother-in-law, William Sturgis. Pioneer settler, farmer, businessman, school board member, justice of the peace, club member, Erasmus Darwin Adams was an active participant in building the community of Cedar Falls from 1845 until 1870. Cedar Falls is better because Erasmus Adams lived here.